We are.
So let's see, we got a little different format here, I guess, but I think are all of the commissioners here?
I'm here.
I see
Andrea's here.
Tony, Andrea. I don't see Jeanette or Phil. Have you heard from either of them? I can't hear you, Billy.
I haven't heard from them.
I haven't heard from them.
All right, well, let's get started and hopefully they join us. What's that? We're getting some funny noise. It's coming through the office.
Do you want to mute your mic,
There we go.
Leva? Thank you.
All right, so I'll call to order the September 12th meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. This meeting is being held virtually. All members are participating by Zoom, so we will take all votes by roll call. Please take care not to screen share your computer or anything that you don't want to be captured by the recording. The meeting is being both audio and video recorded. I'll take a roll call. Commissioners present. We have myself. Ms. Planzer, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm
And
here.
Mr. Buscarin.
Yes, I hear you.
Thank you. And at this point, we do not have Commissioner Marks or Commissioner Topham with us. Hopefully they're able to join. Are there any questions or concerns with the agenda as published? Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted by unanimous consent. We have the minutes from August 13th. Any questions or concerns with those minutes? Consider those adopted. We need to ratify the minutes of August 7th and August 21st. I appreciate a motion to that effect. Any questions?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. That'll bring us to public comment. Do we have any public comment for items which are not otherwise on the agenda? You could raise your virtual hand or speak up, and I will try to recognize you. I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on to item number 4, which is our discussion of an airport manager search contract. I will open this up to just a brief discussion that we sent out requests for proposals to 4 or 5 firms, and 2 firms let us know that they thanked us, but they weren't going to provide a proposal. And we received a proposal from ADK, which is in your packet. And are there any questions on that proposal? And I think it's all detailed pretty well on the process that we will go through to search for our new manager. Is there a motion to enter into the contract with ADK?
So moved.
Is there
I'll
a
second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And that'll move us on to pending leases and contracts set forth on Exhibit 1. Manager Carberg?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to go through the Robert B. Hour change orders for the South Ramp expansion. Change order number 2 was for the emergency centerline work for $160,496.03. That work took place this summer. It was completed overnight. We were grateful to get that done. Number 3 and number 4 are no cost change orders. Respectively, number 3 was a lighting relay versus a contactor cabinet. Number 4 was a switch to a Cape Cod style berm on the air side of gate 30B. and changing the associated grade, I believe, from a double to a single grade. Change order 5 for a combined cost of $40,248.32 was for 3 work items. We utilized RBO to fix a component of the irrigation system, improve the lip on hangar 4 that was causing issues, and replace the sewer cover. And then change order number 6, that's our delay cost for the 1-week delay in issuing the notice to proceed at the beginning of the project for $44,972.31. The costs were all related to travel, transportation, rental of lodging and equipment, and the portion of those costs that could not be reimbursed. I reviewed it with McFarland Johnson, and I believe they are all appropriate. And I would recommend your approval on all 5 change orders. And then
Questions from anybody on the change orders? Is there a motion to approve the contract amendments?
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
The chair votes aye with thanks to both consultants and staff. All your hard work on this project is appreciated.
Okay. And then I believe I have just one more item by Anna, the not to exceed authorization. So I'm requesting in advance of the official task order, and there is an item in your packet, that an amendment to McFarland Johnson's consulting contract not to exceed $50,000 for architectural services related to employee housing. Where this stems from is honestly through my oversight. We don't have anyone on contract to review submittals needed for advancing the employee housing project. These are necessary to approve shop drawings for the rebar, the concrete, windows, and the modular. McFarland Johnson will bring us a completed task order for the October meeting, but the $50,000 is to keep the project on schedule so the architect can advance that work. And I would recommend approval on that as well.
Any questions or further discussion on the not to exceed authorization? Is there a motion to issue this letter and authorize up to $50,000 to be authorized?
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you, Mr. Carberg. And that'll take us on to the discussion of the authorization of the airport manager to sign the water connection reimbursement agreements, Mr. Carberg.
Okay, thank you. So in your packet are 2 forms of agreements that have been reviewed by council. They are the template agreements for documenting the next round of water connections for 11 residences. We anticipate, depending on each individual status, either a direct repayment by the airport to residents who have completed the work, as well as a form that authorizes payment to contractors directly by the airport instead of the resident paying those contractors. You have 1 form for each type of relationship. I've been working with legal and our consultant. We strongly believe and recommend that these agreements are the most expeditious way to complete the work. So my additional ask to this approach is that the commission considers authorizing me to evaluate and approve the scope of work and the cost for each agreement as presented and mediated by the consultant and council, and sign on your behalf rather than wait for each posted meeting. And I would propose that the commission approve it, but with the following guardrails. That approval is limited to the following addresses, which I'll read into the recording. 84 Skyline, 25, 31, and 39 Monahanset, 1 and 3 Webster Road, 50 Okaraw, and 16, 30, 44, and 48 Matacasham Valley Road. that it's not to exceed $60,000 for each of those addresses. There are no otherwise special or controversial conditions, and that staff will report out on our status monthly to the commission. So that is my recommendation on that item. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Carver. Any questions or concerns with this approach? Is there a motion to authorize the airport manager to proceed I think just simply to authorize his ability to sign the connection and reimbursement agreements as described?
So moved.
I'll
Is it-
second.
Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. That will move us on to pending matters, Mr. Carver.
Okay, thank you. So for the South Ramp expansion project updates, the project is substantially complete with the second coat of markings to take place overnight this fall. That will be scheduled. I will be releasing a portion of retainage as appropriate now that we're at substantial completion. Regarding the noise barrier or the wall, our consultant McFarland Johnson has held meetings with 2 noise wall manufacturers or vendors, and they're in the process of scheduling a meeting with a 3rd and final vendor. They're in the process of writing up the subconsultant agreement for the geotech. The geotech work will take place this fall. The acoustical subconsultant HMMH, they're in the process of setting up the initial model layout with the wall parameters provided to them by McFarland Johnson and inputting the data that the airport and McFarland has provided to them. HMMH has in their database the noise data for the 2 aircraft that were needed for the model. They're working with an FBO in California to gather the aircraft noise on the remaining design aircraft. In your packet is also related to the South Ramp, a form of temporary use license to allow National Grid to enter the property and place the transformer and pull the service cables and the new conduits from the new to the existing transformer. This power is needed to run the noise monitoring system and the ramp lights. How this works is the temporary use license will allow National Grid to begin the work once the select board signs a companion document based off of how the deed reads, and then a formal easement will be brought to the May annual town meeting. So I recommend your approval of this form. It's not so much for the ramp lights that are needed, but we've committed to the public noise monitoring system, and we do want to get that power in operation.
Commissioners, any questions about this agreement or a motion to enter into the agreement?
I'll move to enter into the agreement.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Back to you, Mr. Carver.
Thank you. Moving on to the PFAS update. I've assigned the HVAC project task order to McFarland Johnson for initial scoping. What I've asked them to do is to look into a design, bid, and construction management effort to evaluate and implement either an alternative to or an upgrade of the existing terminal geothermal system, given its possible role in moving PFAS contaminated groundwater. At this time, and this is more for your visibility, I'm treating it as a PFAS-related capital project. Possibly pulling from that existing authorization. However, it also may become more appropriate to transition this project into the terminal optimization effort. I don't think either of us have the answer yet, technically, which project this would belong under, but we'll continue to figure that out and report just for tracking and visibility. Then with that being said, I was going to give the floor to Cameron for an update on projects and her conference attendance. Thank you, Cameron.
Everyone,
Thank you.
Yes, to start, I wanted to give everyone a quick update on my trip to Portsmouth, New Hampshire to the AAA Northeast Chapter Conference that I attended last month. I was invited to speak by the conference committee and asked to present a case study on Nantucket's response to PFAS contamination with a panel of 3 other panelists, one of which were one of our consultants with MJ. I presented to roughly 250 airport executives and or consultants in the aviation sphere, and then participated in a Q&A session afterwards. And it's worth pointing out that it became very clear to me in that Q&A session that Nantucket Airport is one of, if not the leading airports in the region responding to and remediating PFAS contamination. There were a number of airport managers that came up to me after the session and shared that they had not even tested for PFAS yet, let alone started to think about connecting homes to water or beginning the remediation process or foam transition. A number of airport managers also wanted to come out to Nantucket and learn from us and speak with our management team. It was certainly eye-opening just to be aware of how far along we are compared to other airports. It made me proud to represent Nantucket. It was a great conference. I learned a lot, but it was that experience of realizing, wow, we are really far along that made me particularly proud. Moving on to status updates, I have a few. The next round of drinking water sampling for residents in the new disposal boundary who are not already connected to town water is tentatively scheduled for the week of September 23rd. We are also working to install monitoring wells on the west side of the airport. Weston was on site doing utility inspections and clearing this week. And while completing these inspections, our engineer actually discovered existing town wells along Monahans and Okawa. So we are coordinating with the town to see if we can gain access to that existing well network for testing. It would make sense so that we wouldn't be putting in wells where there are already wells nearby. As Noah mentioned earlier regarding the phase 2 water connections, our engineer has begun outreach to the 11 residents we will be hooking up to town water. To date, our engineer has already met with 3 of those residents. Those are on Monahans and Webster Road to draft plans and begin the process. Our engineer has also already scheduled meetings with 3 residents on Matacasham Valley Road and begun drafting a plan for connection. So as of today, there are 5 homes that our engineer is still working to schedule meetings with, but everything has been a really productive conversation and we're moving in a great direction. So I'm thrilled that we're able to connect these homes. Lastly, we have invited Weston to present the phase 2 addendum and the IRA status update, I believe number 16, at the October commission meeting next month. And that is it for me.
Thank you, Ms. Woods. Just a quick question. Do we have any indication how old those monitoring wells are or what they were related to, why they were there?
We do not at this time. They looked, according to my engineer, pretty new. So it seemed that they were installed within the past 2 years. And I'm reaching out to town and the water company to see if we can figure out why they were installed and if we can gain access to those.
Thanks. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Woods or our consultants and PFAS in general?
No.
So it sounds like I thought we were going to have a little more discussion tonight, but it sounds like it's October that, and that's probably my misunderstanding. So that we'll have Weston and get into perhaps get an update on that and a little more in-depth discussion on the status of the sampling and Weston's work. Does that sound correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything further on the PFAS? I am not seeing any. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Mr. Carberg, for the crew quarters project update.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will warn you, I do have quite a few items, here related to the crew quarters project. So the construction phase is officially active. So I wanted to take a second just to reintroduce the project team in your minds. It's made up of airport staff, the general contractor, which is Pearl Construction, our OPM, which is CHA Consulting, and our engineering team at McFarland Johnson, which includes Ethan Griffin as the architect, and then with Bracken Engineering under Ethan. So you might hear me reference these different pieces of our project team as we go forward. The work that is underway, we completed the site clearing last week. The subcontractor is on site now, stripping soil, grubbing stumps, preparing for fencing installation and foundation excavation. We have the Sun Island Road lots ready to be used as a staging area for equipment and for the modular boxes when they are delivered. The mark out for the sewer construction on Belvedere Farm Road has been completed. And I wanted to bring your attention also to the bike path closure and a upcoming bike path detour. I'll take ownership for my part of this process. A portion of the bike path on Belvedere Farm Road was closed by the project team without following process. When we realized that, we reversed it. We contacted the town, and we're working with the town to follow process and identify a future safe detour, at which time it might become necessary. We do have equipment and construction vehicles working adjacent to the bike path, so if a closure does have to take place, we will go about it the same way, and I apologize for the one business day closure that was in place. That was unanticipated. Otherwise, I wanted to thank the town for their quick help and coordination to recognize the situation and how important this project is, and put us on a quick path to make it right. For upcoming items, we are meeting with the project team in the town to discuss the sewer construction. We want to make sure that this is handled in the least disruptive manner. I don't want to lead with what I think that manner would be, but obviously we recognize we are constructing, I believe, several hundred feet of sewer extension on Belvedere Farm Road, which is busy. There are schools, parents dropping kids off, kids biking around a local neighborhood. So we're going to give this the seriousness that it deserves. And I'm going to begin scheduling that meeting tomorrow. The meeting isn't taking place tomorrow, but I am beginning that scheduling. And then we're working to a publicly deliverable schedule that I'll have in your packet handout. We're not ready to release a public schedule yet, but I will walk through the schedule. Generally speaking, the sewer work should take place in late September or October, with modular delivery in January or February. Modular assembly and completion in March and April. Finalizing the site work in May, and occupancy in June. So before I move on from that into a discussion on management of the dorm, are there any questions on the work that's underway or anticipated for schedule?
Commissioners, any questions, concerns?
No.
Please proceed.
Okay. So I do not need an answer on this item, but I wanted to set the table possibly for a future discussion in October. But we will take occupancy of this resource in June, and I want to make sure we have a common idea on how we are going to manage it. So it's the strategic item on if we are going to self-manage this dormitory unit or look for a third party. My own personal preference is to issue an RFQ for third-party management services of the then commissioned dorm, but self-management by airport staff is certainly an option. We have a maintenance team, we have a finance team. We can handle the work. The work isn't overwhelming. Yeah, I did not put forward a comprehensive pro and con list here, but I will just mention a few, to tee up your discussion now or an agenda item for next month. The third-party approach, in my opinion, it keeps management at arm's reach. It respects privacy. It separates work from personal issues, not only for senior staff, but for the occupants of the building. And it puts us in a neutral position on rent collection and honestly, possibly an eviction process. And we can be assured of a professional, dedicated operation. In-house, we have the resources available, and it is by far a more cost-effective option. And we are looking at, for comparison, we self-manage the Thompson House now, so it's not a new approach. And it's certainly one that has been successful for us before. That is all that I wanted to tee up for you, so it's your item to discuss and direct as you're comfortable now or possibly future meeting.
Commissioners,
Self-management? Perfect.
go ahead, Mr. Buscarin, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm just asking a question. Do you have any idea how much it would cost to hire a third-party manager for that project?
I had the number and I've forgotten it, but I believe we've held, I want to say $200,000 in the budget for that. So that includes some margin, but I'd anticipate, it could be a six-figure contract for management. For management and responding to expenses and services.
Thanks.
My sense is it's a brand new building. And if we could handle a 50-year-old building, we can handle a brand new building. That's just my sense, is that we always could go into a contract in a couple of years if you find that it's burdensome to your staff, and there's some challenge to it. But it's much more difficult if we go in the other direction and all of a sudden we're paying somebody a contract and they're actually, because they're going to have part of their fee is essentially related to being on call, and then you don't even really need them. I feel like we could give it a try. And I think the harder part of this might be which is probably something that we'll have to discuss unless you envisioned it being part of that management contract, is the selection of tenants. If we need to do that. But again, I almost feel like the airport manager should be the one at the initial outset to figure out who's going to have the most say and the greatest need and benefit to the airport. And you'd end up directing, or the manager would end up directing the third party as in just telling them, what you think, and that's probably what they would end up doing. I mean, that's my initial sense on it.
I agree.
Ms. Planzer?
We could also have sort of a split model if like the money, the collection, the whatever, have somebody manage that. So we keep that at arm's length and do sort of the maintenance and stuff on our own.
Why would we do that if we have a finance department? I mean, a lot of times rent now is sort of auto deposit. You're just tracking it. Ultimately, we have legal already if you needed to get into evictions.
True.
I
I was
mean,
just thinking of keeping it at arm's length kind of thing, like, so we're not, I don't know.
my sense is that perhaps that has to get more worked into employment contracts, and whether that's union, I don't want to go too far, if it's tied to housing and exactly how that works. I would like to just very quickly welcome Ms. Topham. I just noticed that you've joined. Can you hear us, Ms. Topham? All right. I see her in the list, but, oh, here we go.
Yeah, I am muted. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Topham. Have you heard us? Are you able to join in on the discussion?
No, nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I guess I just would not want to see if we give Mr. Carberg some direction so that we could save him some work if there isn't support for that. I just, maybe we need, or if there's more information we need to make that decision. I guess that's, I feel like we can handle it, or could at least give it a try, and could always move into it after even year one. Let's get it get it built, get it populated, and then can decide from there. If you start having problems and it's burdensome, it wouldn't be hard to then put that RFQ out.
We can work with that direction. I think strong initial direction is just as valuable as having gotten my recommendation. So I can take that forward.
Does that, I just want to make sure I'm not the only one that feels, that sounded like Mr. Wiscarin agreed with his plans. Are you agree to give it a shot that way, or do you want to try to go with a hybrid approach?
Oh,
Okay.
whoops, I was on mute. Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with it.
Okay,
Doing
All right.
all right.
so it sounds like that's the way we'll proceed for right now, and could change at any point as needed. If something develops, we can go from there. Back to you. Oh, did you have anything else on crew quarters, Mr. Carberg, or was that the end of it?
One more item on crew quarters, but I don't need action. I just wanted to introduce it. Okay, so the third sort of bullet for crew quarters is I wanted to kick off a discussion about the future of the Thompson House and potential rehab and reuse. So again, just to plant the seed for you for planning level discussions for the future of the Thompson House. The Thompson House is currently a 3-season, 3-bedroom or 3-bunkhouse room cottage where we house our current seasonals. I believe it's usually 8 to 10 people, depending on the gender basis of our summer workforce. Again, no urgent action is required, but right now the house requires continual maintenance. I think it's 50 to 60 years old or more. It's built on, there's no foundation. It's shut off in the winter. The default management scenario is that we use it to house next year what we call our true seasonal staff, or our short seasonal staff. These are typically the college students who are here for June through August. Those types, they're here for a short season, and our longer duration staff who are here for 6 months or more, we house in our new dorm project. And there's nothing wrong with that going forward. We don't need to change that. That's our default. But there are potential options, and it's continual upkeep of the structure, a major renovation, or a demolition and rebuild. There are 3 more options, but they wouldn't really be my recommendation, and they would be to rent for income, to sell, and just demolish and have the raw land available. But those are also options. Just to put a flavor on it, I think part of the action is a discussion on the purpose. If the airport would need it for continued seasonal housing, it could house 5 to 8 people. If the airport would want it for full-time employment housing, a renovation or a new structure, it could house 2 to 3 full-time people possibly. Under a senior housing scenario, it could house 1 family. Of course, you just approved a contract with ADK to search for the new airport manager. A future airport manager house is a possibility for this structure. The only recommendation that I would make for you and for staff to consider in the back of your head is that any future work that involves a housing option or housing investment for this house also involves electrifying the companion gate, which is vehicle gate 29, just to plant that seed as well. Any questions on the Thompson House, or just sort of a broad approach to that strategy?
Commissioners? I think, go ahead. Anyone? I think we put our focus into getting the current most of our efforts into getting the dorm built. And then we will maybe be able to revisit this in a few months, partially through that project, when we have a better sense of timing and whether there'll be any overruns or delays. Delays, I think is the word I was looking for. Because again, if that project comes online in time, then maybe you don't need it, but the slightest delay into next season would, probably necessitate at least one more season of use of the Thomason House, which I wouldn't be surprised anyway, just generally speaking, which would really get us some more time and we'd have a better, understanding of what to do there. My personal feeling is it's likely a replacement of a single family dwelling with a single family dwelling, but that's just a preliminary sort of thought. Anyone else? Your recommendation, Ms. Carberry, is just to keep it as for some thoughts and then, put something more formal together down the road just a little bit.
Yeah, so keep it as your any ideas for the future, and just understand, the natural direction or the natural tendency would be for short-term summer seasonal housing in the interim.
I guess, just thinking aloud here a little bit and having just sat through a couple hours with you in Capcom, that's where the waiting doesn't maybe work so well, right? Is that if we need to program funds for doing something there, the delay that ends up happening through that process would probably be more of a reason to try to think about if we wanted to have some kind of a placeholder for X dollars in a certain out year for whatever might happen there. And then getting into the budget and sort of more of the, I don't think there was anything on that on the CIP for that, was there? That I missed?
No, we have the current program for the townhouse, but I believe at this stage, the airport would be looking at a fiscal 27 capital item for, say, a demo and rebuild.
All right. Thanks for planting the seed. Maybe we all should think about it a little bit, and then perhaps we should. That's the only thing I would think of initially is whether to start considering, X dollars to program in for not necessarily exactly what's going to happen there, but that would then start to keep that planning process and thinking towards that there's going to need to be some investment of funds into that property. And, the extent of which will be guided by what we decide to do.
Understood.
Anyone else?
What about the access, the gate? What needs to be changed there?
It's currently a manual gate. It would be a lot easier, in my opinion, even now, to have that electrified, so it could open and close with the garage door opener.
Okay.
Can we just
Especially
get that into our planning process for fence replacement and gates?
I may try to take advantage of some upcoming opportunities for that if possible.
I think it's just
We've definitely worked on
having it
it.
done isn't gonna hurt anything, regardless of what happens over there. I mean, it's gonna remain airport property, so no matter what, there's gonna be a need for whether it's maintenance, employees, the ease of access to the south, side of the airport there. I think there's a value to be had there if we can incorporate that into one of the fence projects.
Okay. Rich, you've taken a note of that, I see.
I did, thank you. And I just will say that electrifying gates is not an eligible FAA cost.
Ah, that wasn't what I was hoping to hear.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
All right, well, let's, maybe we can get at least on a schematic preliminary basis and understand what kind of cost it's going to be to run that. I'm sure the running the power is the bigger cost than the gate itself. I would just hazard a guess, but I don't know that.
Yeah, we'd have to run power from MVR.
Well, that might not be so bad
Yeah.
if we actually, but then why we put we don't get into details, separate meter
Yeah.
and just come off of one of those transformers. That might not be so bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Anything further on crew quarters or Thompson House? So maybe it sounds like we're on to the terminal, please, Mr. Carberg.
Okay. I will introduce some team members in a moment. I have this set up. I was going to lead the curb frontage discussion, but I do have Drew available from McFarland Johnson, and if it strays into a discussion on the terminal, Jonathan McCready and Priyanka Menon are here also for that item B, the terminal presentation. So I might refer to them. But Boyana, would you be able to share the terminal improvement phase 1 parking alternative screen? So I distributed this document in advance just to solicit some feedback. I approach it as a fairly simple conversation. That's why I'm addressing it this way, but that doesn't have to be the case. It's your airport. But we have in the packet a set of potential alternatives we've worked at a staff level with the consultant for the curb frontage changes in front of the terminal that would accompany the future design alternative to the north for the terminal. At a staff level, we've reviewed and suggested adopting alternative 3. And I'm not walking through to present the alternatives. If you would like that, we'd certainly oblige. I would have Mr. Patel do that. But the reason we are promoting alternative 3 is that despite the greatest cost, it does give the most room and sensible operation for separation of each modal type between the TNCs, the taxis, and departure traffic. I believe it also acknowledges the reality that our dominant time-sensitive use is drop-off of departing passengers, and we do want to make room for that. I really like that it retains the dedicated operation and visibility for our taxi group and taxi association. They're a vocal user of the airport, but it still dedicates close-in TNC operation space. If anyone has ever picked up an Uber in Boston Logan, you know it's a long walk, but on Nantucket, putting it on the far side of the short-term parking lot, you walk longer getting off of your gate, finding a bathroom in Logan than you would to make that walk at Nantucket. With that being said, we do have, I'm available and we have consultants available. If you'd like more of a walkthrough of this parking presentation, and we're all available to answer questions.
Any questions, commissioners?
No.
No. Go ahead, Mr. Carberg.
Okay, well, with that being said, we have Priyanka Menon and Jonathan McCready from Fenwick McCready here to give you an update on the terminal project, and it's really focused on designing with Nantucket in mind. And I believe they will also be ready to give sort of an order of magnitude on cost. I wanted to introduce that I really valued sort of the architectural pre-discussion that we have. I'm familiar with their firm's work. I appreciate the attention to local aesthetics, but I haven't really given the architect specific direction other than be sure you're giving us a concept that has been designed with Nantucket in mind. And I think they've done a great job with that. They're going to spend some time talking to that. But it is also the commission's opportunity to give any specific direction or further influence the product that they're going to bring to you. So I hope that's an adequate introduction for you, Jonathan and Priyanka, and I'll turn it over to you. And I don't know if you have the capacity to share the presentation or if Boyana should do that.
I believe we do. Priyanka, give that a try.
Let me know when you're able to see it.
Yep, there we go.
Yep.
Great. All right. Thank you to the commission, to NOAA, for the opportunity to get together. This is our third conversation of our series of conversations about the redevelopment and improvements to the terminal. Our first conversation in July, as you recall, was really about identifying the problem, what isn't working. Our second conversation in August was about coming up with a series of functional solutions. We actually brought a series of options to the table. We discussed them together, and we arrived at a consensus for a preferred option, being referred to as the north option. And so now what we want to start doing is understanding with a functional solution, what does that mean for the architectural space, both inside and outside, and in particular outside, and the massing and size of the building? What are the extents that are going to be impacted as part of the functional solutions we've developed? We're not going to be presenting design proposals tonight. That is part of the next phase, the design phase, which would be upcoming. But we do want to sort of set the table, as Noah had used that term earlier, with regards to how we're approaching this, and basically just making sure that we're thinking about it in the right way. Next. So in addition to the sort of massing ideas that we're going to be talking about, also, as Noah mentioned, we are developing cost ranges as well as schedule ideas. So we'll give you sort of a little preview of those, but the more formal cost and schedule projections will be part of a final report that will be upcoming in October. Next. Very quickly sort of review where we were. So what we have here is your existing terminal, which as we identified deficiencies last time, essentially is a lack of space. That is the primary problem. And it also is a problem with regards to the flow, in particular, a single entrance off of the departures curb, shown in the left-hand black arrow on this drawing, and needing all departing passengers to basically work their way all the way through a relatively small terminal to get over to security. So it's both a space issue and a flow issue that we're looking to solve. Next. In terms of the space issue, from an order of magnitude standpoint, just reviewing again, the dark blue bar is the space that you have. And then the light blue colors is the space that you need in order to meet standards. And the red is space that you don't need, that we could make smaller. And so as you can see here, there's a significant number of spaces that need to get larger and only a very few that need to get smaller in order to meet the modern needs of the terminal. Next. As I mentioned in the last meeting, we looked at other options about how that expansion might occur in terms of the improvements and optimization. The North Build one was selected, and it was selected in part because it optimized all of the existing space and treated additional space as sort of the last resort. And that was the focus of the North Build option. That's what was selected. Priyanka. And so lastly, part of the review, what were the key aspects of that North Build, which is here? Well, first of all, is optimizing all of the space, especially back of house space shown in yellow. Also, a key point was providing 2 entrances instead of 1 entrance off of the drop-off, which Priyanka, if you just show with the cursor. And what this allows is that passengers that are departing on the larger carriers can now enter at a new entrance, very close to where the bag claim entrance is now. And that will bring them directly to ticketing and to the security checkpoint without having to work their way through the rest of the terminal, massively reducing congestion and reducing the amount of additional square footage that we need to address that congestion. The other key aspect is that we'll be removing the tent, as it's affectionately called, and we'll be increasing the size of interior conditioned hold rooms, shown in light blue, number 5 here. It's essentially in the area of the existing baggage claim, the larger number 5. There we go. And then part of the optimization and increased square footage will be associated with a new baggage claim shown 8 and 9. Next. The other piece of the optimization is that we have actually met with some stakeholders, and we have identified that there are back of house spaces, functions, in particular TSA, that can be accommodated in the basement. We've also code reviewed that the basement is allowed to accommodate those functions. So I think we've successfully developed a strategy to optimize the use of the basement, again, with the goal of reducing or minimizing the amount of extra square footage needed to meet the needs of the modern terminal. Next. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Priyanka to talk about how we're approaching, again, not with design solutions just yet, but how we're approaching the idea of the exterior and the massing of the building.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. So our approach to massing started with looking at building with Nantucket in mind, as Noah and Jonathan said. This was our focus, and it was aimed at understanding what the island's language of preservation is and what this would mean for the terminal. Couple of themes that came out of this was, one, there's definitely a focus on human scale, and that was central to massing. The second is looking at an additive and subtractive language. This was used to sort of emphasize and de-emphasize volumes and experiences spaces within them. Third, there's also an emphasis on balance and rhythm as opposed to simple symmetry, which is completely different than what we thought of Nantucket. So it's really interesting to sort of learn that about the island's architecture. And then the fourth thing is there's sort of this use of building elements like dormers, windows, or cupolas. It's typically to break up the larger mass of the building, but it also emphasizes daylighting on the inside. So there is this sort of subtle focus of daylighting through this sort of architecture here. We then started looking at local precedents and styles, started up with the early English style from the 1600s through the colonial or federal styles, which is what you predominantly see in Nantucket right now. There's an interesting use of parapets and balustrades in this period. And then finally towards the Greek with a little bit of a Gothic revival in there towards the late 1800s. We do definitely see correlations, the massing style evolving with the industry on a whole on the island, and also during the post-Civil War era, but there was definitely a search for national identity, and that impact is seen on the island as well. As the economy sort of picked up post-Civil War, the use of this additive volume in Nantucket also grew as cash flow sort of increased. All of this together helped us define what this Nantucket aesthetic is, and the second part of how we sort of synthesize this was looking at what the terminal building language is and sort of putting it together and understanding what that means for the new project of ours. So for our existing terminal, we started looking at this from the roof plan. So everything that you see in blue out here is the original terminal, and everything that you see in orange is the 2008 edition. So there are two primary axes, as you can see. One which is defined by the original terminal in the east-west direction that's running horizontal along the page. And the second primary axis is defined by the 2008 edition in the north-south direction running vertical in the page. Looking at this more closely, on the original terminal, the roofs appear to be organized. Whoops, sorry. On the original terminal, the roofs appear to be organized by this primary axis. Roofs on this axis follow the steepest slopes. It's around an 8 and 12, with dormers joining these at a similar slope as you can see towards the air side. Secondary roofs join these with a slightly lesser slope, and then tertiary roofs join the secondary roofs at a slope definitely lower than this. So there is a definite hierarchy, keeping the primary axis as the main defining principle. For the 2008 edition, this language is slightly different. The longest roof is what lies along the primary axis, and this is over the existing security checkpoint, as you can imagine, standing on the inside of the terminal. The baggage claim roof, funnily, is the steepest. It's almost at around 45 degrees of an angle. It's not seen anywhere else on the terminal, 12 and 1 slope, but this is the steepest and it goes perpendicular to the primary axis right now. Finally, the dormers are also a little steeper than the primary roof angle, and from the land side and air side, you also see a skirt that mimics the slope roof along the periphery, and it conceals the flat roof that you see in the center that creates this lower ceiling over the existing terminal corridor. So pulling this information out, we started defining what the terminal language is as two parts. One is the original terminal, with its primary axis being the main predominant organizing principle. And the second is the 2008 edition, with the primary axis only defining what the longest roof is, while the predominant roof is a sort of dramatic slope at the existing baggage claim that's perpendicular to this axis. We then started looking at building massing in itself of the whole terminal. So again, everything in blue that you see here is the existing older terminal, the original terminal. Everything in a light blue is the ATCT, which is the Air Traffic Control Tower. And everything in yellow is the 2008 edition. In the blue, as you can see, there's definitely a hierarchy and rhythm seen through the building profile. So the building profile is the outline that you see that's running horizontal to the page. This steps down as we move away from the current tower. The tower's form follows function, but it's also secondary roofs have the same sort of principle of the original terminal. Given our flow plan, our massing modifications would be in proximity to the 2008 edition while maintaining the original terminal's form and roof structures in place. Looking at this in plan, the blue defines the new addition where we would sort of be able to dictate what our improvements are. The white is where the existing footprint is, and which most of it would be sort of maintained and kept intact. As for the hatched areas, that is the region where we're sort of reconsidering massing, and it primarily goes over the existing hold room spaces where we think that there might be an added benefit of passenger experience enhancements. So we started looking at this in elevation as well. And the orange is approximately where we would sort of plug into the new massing modifications. The idea is to use this as an opportunity to make a more cohesive language for the terminal, reflective more of its original terminal paths, and also adding in some of the island's preservation goals that we sort of walked through in the beginning of this presentation. The second area that we started looking at was, as you can see with our new project, we're sort of adding a new terminal entrance. And so with this, we're changing pattern of passenger movement to this new departures vestibule. In elevation, this sort of suggests a kind of unification that needs to happen as people make the choice of using one vestibule over the other. And so there's an opportunity for an architectural element, like maybe a canopy structure of sorts, to sort of emphasize this new pattern of movement. This in no way would be a completely enclosed space. It would sort of blur the inside with the outside, as we see in the preservation guidelines. So this was the overall approach to the massing. And in terms of next steps, I'll sort of hand it out back to Jonathan. Oh, you might be muted.
4 years and I still forget to unmute myself. My apologies. The purpose of sort of going through this together is to hopefully communicate that the way that we're approaching this is with the exterior, approaching it with the same level of rigor and analysis and sort of thoughtfulness as we approach with the interior in terms of layout and flow and operations. So that as we start to get into actual design elements, we've created a language and sort of a set of rules that we're going to be working within, so that that should allow the process to move forward smoothly and also incorporate comments from the HDC and other agencies as we move forward. So the first question or input that we would like to know is just if the way that we're approaching the analysis as it relates to designing with Nantucket in mind seems to make sense and that we're on the right track before we jump into actual design. The other items that we just wanted to raise here at the very, very end is that our next steps is really concluding this initial planning process and then jumping into the design process. So a couple of items there have to do with developing cost estimate ranges and also understanding what type of a schedule that we're probably looking at. I'll start with the schedule. We're probably looking at the ability to start construction in the neighborhood of the end of 2025 and early 2026, and utilizing the time between now and then to finalize all the design details, construction documents, and approvals processes. So it gives you sort of a range of what we think is most likely in terms of the overall timeline. That, of course, is pending approval of this body in order to take the series of the next steps along the way. And in terms of overall cost, again, the cost will depend on the actual design itself as it gets implemented and as we go forward. However, at this early stage, understanding the overall square footages that we're dealing with, the level of renovation, the areas that we feel that the exterior will be impacted as outlined by Priyanka, as opposed to areas that we feel we can maintain as the way they are. Adding in the premiums that are associated with working on the island, the need to actually phase the project very carefully and maintain the airport operations along the way, and take into account that we're looking at costs not in this year's dollars, but probably about a year and a half from now dollars. We're probably looking at a total project cost range of somewhere in the neighborhood of $35 to $45 million. Now, it's very, very early in the process, and there's lots of things that we can do and continue to move forward on, but we did want to begin to set that overall range for the commission here at this early stage. And with that, thank you for your time and are available to answer any questions or get into greater detail if you would like.
Thank you. That's sobering. I appreciate it. You know, that question's out there. So let's keep going. I don't have any, you know, when it comes to architecture, you guys are the experts on the things like the roof pitches and that sort of thing. I don't really have anything to add there. Commissioners?
Are we required to do these changes?
Mr. McCready?
When you say required, are you referring to the entire project itself or certain aspects of it? And just want to understand the question a little bit further.
Any of it.
So there are no, I guess what I would say is that there are no, and no, I'll make sure I get this correctly. There are no federal authorities that are demanding that a project be done. There are a series of deficiencies to the airport that over the years have been getting more and more exacerbated, as in particular, the size of aircraft, not necessarily more flights, but the size of aircraft have increased, and that is an industry trend. And that puts greater strain on the congestion within the terminal building. So this project would serve to alleviate that congestion, which will get worse as larger aircraft are replaced with the more mid-size aircraft. And Noah, you may have more to add to that.
So I agree with that. I just wanted to put a finer point on it. We've identified shortcomings for the terminal. In absence of overcoming those shortcomings, the requirements then shift to how are we going to operate the terminal environment in a safe manner, and as effectively as we can. So I believe items could come into play, such as the pet service area requirements. We will have to meet that. That's a minor component of this. A competition plan, because we won't be able to maintain the level of air service we have now with the number of carriers and the hubs. So we would have to supply documents to the FAA on how we were trying to make the airport as competitive as possible, given the circumstances. But no, we are not required to do this project.
Second question is, how much of the $45 million would be AIP money, federal or state?
Mr. Carbo, who would you like to sort of take a crack at that?
Oh, well, I'd like to take a crack at that, and then you can correct me if needed. I'll be honest, the bill program, to which we've submitted one application and which we'll submit a second, it authorizes up to $20 million per terminal project. However, the overseers of that program have taken the stance, so it seems from reading the announcements, to distribute less money to more airports. So I think a grant award to the airport, given our profile, I happen to think it's likely, but it's small. It's in the neighborhood of $5 million. As far as regular discretionary fund competition under the AIP, I wouldn't anticipate any. Rich, do you have a different take?
I will just continue on that discussion in that for the commission, the FAA has a sort of an eligibility guideline, and it has to do in big picture sense on public space versus revenue space versus back of office space. And you sort of boil it down into an eligibility sort of number. And the last terminal, the 2008 terminal, was about 59% eligible. Now, this particular expansion appears to have more public space than not. So, we could be, and again, neither the architect nor the rest of the team has come up with this number. But if it is sort of higher than that, and let's call it for this discussion 75% eligible, that means that PFCs and other potential sources could be used to pay for the eligible portion. The ineligible portion would just be local funds. And the matching percentage of any eligible amount would be local funds.
Thank you. Mr. Buscarin, anything further follow-up?
No, I got two answers, and that's fine. That's good.
I think a lot of this has to do, I think, as you said, with the larger aircraft, and then more passengers deplaning and enplaning at a single time instead of being spaced out, and then combined with, I think we're all aware of the shortcomings of the tent type operation. So I think we keep looking at it. I don't think there's any commitment yet at this point. But we need to understand what would be the best path forward, and then we can discuss, understand costs and figure out where and if to go forward from there.
Agreed.
So it sounds like, Mr. McCready, you've got the direction you need, unless you need something further.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have anything further. Anyone else, anything further on the terminal? Back to you, Mr. Carberg. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah, well, that's a good segue into finance items on the agenda. I have two items under finance for you. The first is our fiscal year 26 potential capital project requests. In your packet, I put the CIP, but I believe this is the CIP that you have seen before. It has not been updated with recent meetings. As far as those recent meetings, airport staff held our CIP meeting with the FAA and Mass DOT Aeronautics on August 21st. The purpose of this meeting is to review and update the airport's 5-year capital improvement plan, especially with attention paid to grant-funded projects. This plan then becomes the basis of the next year's capital request and reflects airport's strategic priorities, as well as recommended or required facility actions by congressional priority, FAA design changes, or other external need. So this meeting went really well. We held it at Logan Airport. There are no major changes anticipated to the CIP that's in your packet, other than a few projects moving around fiscal years. Right now, we're waiting on final comments from the FAA and DOT prior to updating this spreadsheet, which I'll include in your packet and review with you when we have those comments. So again, I'm happy to discuss any item the commission has a question on in the packet, although I would like to defer any in-depth comments until after we have our stakeholders' comments. With that being said, one item that stands out and is worth discussing, and as we discussed in the meeting, is the upcoming runway rehabilitation work scheduled for federal fiscal year 2028. We currently have a cost program of $96.8 million for the runway, and that will increase as the FAA is having the airport now evaluate options for shifting the runway in line with maintaining a full runway 6 safety area. Again, it's not a portion of the project that's planned, but the FAA is having us evaluate it, and we'll bring that forward into our next master plan TAC committee and to the commission as it develops. But where we agree with the FAA and where I think we have the support of the FAA is we will need to pursue congressionally directed spending for this project and discuss with our stakeholder group the best way to carry that forward. And in past years, it used to be that the FAA may not have appreciated congressionally directed spending if it pulled money from the FAA AIP program. But through whatever process, I believe now it's the term that replaced the term earmark. For the region can't fund this project in its entirety, and it's a project that's 90% eligible by the AIP program guidelines. So the only solution available is to pursue that congressionally directed funding. So in other words, that's the term going political. So we're expected to go political and work with our stakeholders to obtain funding for this project, and we probably need to start designing that effort how we wish to proceed in the next couple of months. Any questions on capital process or the runway before I move on to the preliminary budget?
Commissioners? Let's move on, please.
Okay. I have a few items before I turn it over to Maria, mostly because I want to avoid giving her the hard questions in her first month on the job. It's in your packet as a handout for the draft preliminary budget. I wanted to recognize the past work of Jamie. She left a great trail of breadcrumbs and legacy for Maria to start with. I also wanted to introduce and recognize Maria for coming in and doing a great job joining the team and immediately stepping into the budget development role without missing a step. So there are a few items on the budget I want to take ownership of and provide a high-level overview before I turn the floor over to Maria. Again, it's not that she isn't capable, but the answer might be, well, Noah directed me to do that. So I'll just take those items now. So for an overview, we're in a situation where we need to provide a budget to the town by September 20th to fit with their time frame. Their time frame this year doesn't align with the commission schedule or commission approval. So just please be aware that we're on a parallel track. We'll present this to the town. You may see a preliminary draft on a select board agenda. I'm not sure. But again, it's your budget. This is not your only chance to opine. We're planning on returning in October with a final version for your approval or further direction as you see fit. I characterize this effort as an incremental budget based off of last year. It's mostly unchanged. This was deliberate on our part. We have new staff in the finance manager and future airport manager. So I believe this approach provides the most stability as well as the most room for a potential revised budget should the commission and the airport manager have different directions they'd like to take. So we have a good, smooth, stable starting point. So we're realizing revenue. We continue to forecast high single increases in revenue and expenses. Our budget forecast is still based on a look back of the 3-year average for most categories. We've only made adjustments where we believe we have a good basis for doing so. I hope and expect the revenue position to be maintained as positive as it has been. While that credit goes to staff, we are subject to macroeconomic factors, especially as they could affect business jet operations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 specific items. I've directed Maria to hold salary of $225,000 for the then airport manager. That's just my own personal estimation. We're holding a new position for a custodian. I've asked Maria to hold $360,000 in the budget under contractual obligations due to a lack of a better category, but I envision this specifically as a salary incentive potential for staff, for the new manager to direct to the commission, for the continued safe and efficient operation of the airport. This also reserves funds for other direction that you and the airport manager might like to take with hiring and retaining key positions. I've directed $125,000 in the new line item specific for invasive species management with items in follow-up years, and this would be specifically to combat landside Japanese knotweed, though there are other locations and other species. We're holding $50,000 in additional noise management software for the ramp. And for catering, we're showing a loss of $278,000 in revenue, but this is offset by an equivalent reduction in expenses based off of the method of billing, and that's an effort that predated. There's still plenty to do for the budget, so I'll turn it over to introduce Maria Bashiva, our new finance manager. We're thrilled to have her on board, and she will present the preliminary 2026 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Cowper. Ms. Bashiva, very nice to meet you and welcome and thank you. I'll echo that. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to work with you and meet you hopefully in person soon. I'm going to share my screen with the Excel file that you actually had in your package. The town, as Noah mentioned, town issued budget instructions on August 20th, much earlier than past years. The budget is due September 20th. In the past, it was not due until first week of November. They changed the deadline because they're changing the way they're presenting their town's manager's budget message. In the last 2-3 weeks, I met with managers of each division: operations, maintenance, FBO, security, and environmental. And we reviewed their budget needs for the new fiscal 2026 that will start next year in July 1st. I reviewed all open contracts with our business manager, Boyana. In front of you is our preliminary budget for your review and approval. Again, this year, I used 400,000 from PFC to balance the budget. As you might know, some of you might know or not, but I started on August 12th, so we had a short time to review and prepare everything. I wanted to be consistent and conservative. Overall, the increase in the budget year over year, it's $723,845. And I'm gonna switch to the payroll budget. I used OpenGov to budget salaries. This is a software that the rest of the town uses, and it's available for us to use. Some of the budget increases in the payroll section are just housekeeping items, since my approach is a little bit different than what Jamie used to do. We have one new position for the new fiscal year requested. That's a maintenance custodial position. This could be also just a placeholder and could be a different position if needed at later point. The seasonal salaries show a decrease of 11.6% based on 3-year actuals, but still account for potential increases in the rates. And I also just moved $20,000 from seasonal to summer rates, since we never had actually uploaded budget in there, and we have summer rates every summer. The seasonal rate increase is approximately $1 every year on the hourly rate, and it goes through process of reviewing with admin and comparing what the town is doing with their seasonal staff. The longevity, if you scroll down, as I mentioned, those items right here, it's just housekeeping items. How Jamie was presenting it, she was combining all accounts under one budget line item. I like to look at it that way, and I just would like to upload budget in the overtime budget line items. The longevity shows increase of 32.7% based on the increases in the union contract and some people hitting their 50-year anniversary and starting to receive a longevity in the new fiscal 26. Health insurance, it's increased by 10% based on percentage provided by town finance and their health insurance consultants. The next item worth mentioning is the compensation and employment. This is a new item since 24. Finance is requested that we start budget for this. This increase is just to be in line with what last year's actuals were. In Medicare, we have an increase of 15.1% because I added a percentage for the potential bonuses that Noah mentioned earlier. Overall, our salary budget is 13.3% more than last fiscal year, when last fiscal year was 2.9% compared to fiscal 2024. I just want to make sure, do you see my screen? Do you see the spreadsheet? Okay, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't tell. I just want to make sure I'm not. Next, I'll move to our operating budget. There are some budget line items that they weren't mentioning. Noah directed me to mention anything that it's over $100,000 or over 10%, but if you have any questions, please let me know. So the next item is the fuel storage facility maintenance. We increased this one with 31% based on our existing contracts for the new fiscal year with Mass Tank, Delta Mechanical annual fire pump maintenance, NSG Life annual fire alarm maintenance, and Encore annual monitoring. The FBO catering expense shows minus 78%, just because the way how we do the billing now with our main vendor, it doesn't go through the accounts payable process anymore. Clients pay directly to our vendor, and we charge them just for our markup of 25% for the catering. The Miscellaneous purchases for the FBO, it's up 57% because we included in the budget much needed new furniture for the pilot lounge. Professional services is increased with 10% based on inflation and any contract increases that we might have in the new fiscal year. Marketing budgeting line item, it's decreased 67% based on actuals for the last 3 years. We didn't spend any money on actuals the last two years. We are planning to in the new fiscal year, so we still left $10,000 in the budget. Miscellaneous purchases in operations is increased with 49% because includes new firefighter foam, meter calibrations, and trailer storage that we want to purchase. A couple of one-time expenses for tablets and Motorola services were backed up. So that's why we were able to save a little bit of money. So I increased it on one side and decreased on the other. This item right here is just a little bit of housekeeping for me. In our budget, in our municipal software, Munis, we use usually other enterprises and other departments use a different budget line item with different code for contingency. So all I'm doing here, it's moving this budget line item over here. So it's more consistent with the rest of the departments and it's more easier for me to pull reports in Munis. So it's really a housekeeping item. The transfer to the general fund for the new fiscal year, it's $209,695. This is our last payment per our payment plan with the town, unless we decide to pay it off in this fiscal year. And now I'm moving down to revenue. We increased the fuel sales with $175,000 or 8% for the new fiscal year. In the revenue part of the budget, this is based on fiscal 23 and 24. It's consistent with our fuel sales. As I mentioned, usually the budget was due much later than this. So in October, I'll have time to spend more with Noah and Preston, and we'll have the opportunity to actually analyze sales, forecast traffic, and present fuel revolver spending limit for the new year. The general aviation rent fees, the parking lot fees, and airline landing fees are all increased based on steady 3-year actuals. The commercial rent fee shows decrease of 32%. This is based on the last fiscal year actuals. In fiscal 24 was the first year when we charged commercial rent fees on its own revenue accounts, so we don't have enough data to compare 3 actuals, so I use just the last fiscal year as guidance. The rental fees from employee housing went up because here it's included rent from Nobody Housing and potentially rent from 8 employees. Overall, the revenue is up 6%, from which is $723,845, and this is less than last fiscal year when the total budget increased 14% compared to fiscal 2024. I'll stop sharing my screen, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bashiva. Commissioners, any questions?
No questions.
Anyone? I had one, which was back to the expense line item that you mentioned, the bonuses. I was just wondering why that was in the Medicare line item.
So Medicare, it's 1.45%, and it's based on total wages. If we potentially decide to pay employee bonuses to our employees, this will be part of their wages, and accordingly, we will have to pay the Medicare tax.
Thank you.
So that's
I
why.
understand. Gotcha. Thank you. Looks good. Thank you very much for your work on that. Anybody else? And we don't need Mr. Carberg, formal action on this at this point. It's just a continued draft, correct?
Correct. It's just an update on what the budget looks like, what the plan is, and if you had any comments or directions, we would certainly take them and integrate them.
And thank you for your point on, I know it's a small one, but the invasive species management on the land side, trying to get after that knotweed. I think that's responsible land stewardship that I like to see, that we're taking part of that as well. So I appreciate that. Anybody else? Sounds like we will move on, please, to the grant awards.
Okay, so I'd like to read the grants, then recommend approval of A to C collectively. Then I'll have a little bit more information on D. For AIP 86 for $256,140. This was what we approved utilizing the process enabled by the Home Rule petition. It was for ecological monitoring work covered by Mass DOT and FAA Aeronautics at a 90 to 5-to-5 split. Item B, AIP 87 replaced catch basins for $141,955. This work was part of the now completed South Apron project, but this particular scope was added after the initial scope. And even though it was eligible, it's reimbursable in nature and paid out of this grant instead of the main discretionary grant. And C is runway 624 centerline. Design and obtain permits for $69,660. I want to preemptively just disambiguate this grant process for the record, even though it's a small amount. We originally bid approximately 3,000 linear feet of runway 624 centerline repair for spring repair. The bids came in high and above our authorization based on the critical nature of the work. We took on a limited emergency change order with RBO to fix the most pressing portion of it. You approved this change order earlier, so thank you for that. We did not want to lose eligibility for all of the work we had the consultant do for design, so the FAA allowed us to convert this work to a design-only grant reimbursable at our standard splits. So this represents that grant, and then the construction work, we will submit another based on bid for that work to be eligible. So this preserves our funding for the remaining work. So I'd recommend ratification of these three grants, and then I do want to discuss the PFAS grants in a little bit more detail before recommending ratification.
Any questions or a motion to ratify the first three grants?
Move to ratify the three grants.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. And back to you for PFAS grant, Ms. Carberg.
Okay, so this is good news, but I did want to spend a few minutes discussing it because it's a bit of an oddball for ratification, and I want everyone to have the background. So Cameron Woods, our environmental coordinator, responded to a grant opportunity and won it for us. So I take no credit for her work. She did it, and with ratification of this grant, the airport will not only be able to address a costly problem for us in the fuel farm, but advance the knowledge mitigation on PFAS contamination nationwide. It's a little bit lofty, but it's not untrue. So all of that is great, but we have a non-standard grant to administer, and I want to present that to you. So the nature of the work is that we will do some method testing for rendering PFAS inert in water and evaluating coatings to encapsulate PFAS in the concrete at the fuel farm, because that PFAS in the concrete continues to leach. We have to run it through the GAC filter, change the GAC filter. It's not effectively and permanently mitigated yet. So this grant will proceed towards that by evaluating coatings. The grant, I believe, formally, it's a supplemental FAA AIP discretionary grant for our rules of administration. However, it's an outlier from our standard acceptance process and timeframe. The grant program was executed and implemented in a re-election year with what I suspect is a motivation to get funds out the door and projects accomplished. So as such, it doesn't follow the typical AIP cycle. I'm grateful that we have this grant and the funding is available, even if we have to hustle a little bit to meet a political deadline. So the funding was authorized on May 16th when President Biden signed the FAA Reauthorization Act into law. I believe Karen submitted her grant application on June 17th, and public notice of the grants was made on September 6th for the amount of $1.2 million. And we have until September 16th to accept the grant, which you can do tonight with your ratification. So I anticipate that this will be 90% funded by FAA. We're talking about it with Mass DOT, but they can't commit to their typical 5% share, given that they programmed all of their funding before this grant opportunity existed. I think they like the project, but it wasn't in their time frame to program funds either. So our sponsor share is yet unknown, but I think most likely, if the $1.2 million is a 90% amount, the total project amount will be higher than that. And 1.4 million, where the airport pays 134,000, is my math. So my proposed course of action for the airport is that we gratify and accept this funding opportunity, and that we utilize the same process as we did for our continued environmental monitoring grant, where we utilize the process we achieved via the home rule petition. So I've brought this to town finance's attention and asked them to preemptively place it on a FinCom agenda. As part of your ratification, I'm also asking for your approval to adopt the charter amendment authorized by Article 94 from the 2021 ATM, where we raise our portion of capital authorization by your approval, FinCom's approval, and the select board's approval. And then we bring it to the next available meetings. We have a backup plan or a backup idea that we can use our existing PFAS appropriations. But I do want to keep those appropriations available and unencumbered for the significant work that we have to do with home connections, addressing the geothermal system, and other time-sensitive project work. And I'd like to have a funding source separately identified for this grant. So that is my recommendation. I hope that's just the right amount of background and not too complicated, but it is, again, a bit of an oddball grant, so I wanted you to have that background.
Any further discussion or questions? Is there a motion to approve the PFAS grant? Or we want to go through with a commission authorization on top of what's already been done? Is that what you're asking for?
So I'm asking the commission to ratify grant acceptance and initiate the Article 94.
Right. So I think we bundle that all together. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
For a second?
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. Ms. Topham, how do you vote? Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We didn't hear from Ms. Topham. Ms. Topham, did you?
Aye.
Are you in favor of that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so that was unanimous. And thank you, a little extra thank you there to Ms. Woods. Really appreciate you chasing that down, and really all staff pulling that together. It could be a really interesting model type project. Well, please keep us posted. Back to you, Mr. Carberg.
Okay, thank you. So the G.J. Smith Incorporated tenant alteration application. I've had active correspondence with the tenant regarding several items stemming from the stop work order issued by the town of Nantucket. I believe that correspondence is all present in your packet, but I'm going to briefly summarize it. So on August 15th, I sent the tenant a letter requiring they provide a plan to remedy the stop work order violations. I received a response on August 29th, after which I requested additional information on September 6th. Then receiving that information on September 9th, I characterize my impression of these exchanges that the tenant is actively working to remedy the site conditions to address the stop work order and pending tenant alteration application. even though some time has evolved, he's been working with an engineering company to provide the drawings that we requested, and those have taken some time. There are a couple items that I believe the commission should give me further direction on if they so choose. And these are the water line relocation versus the concrete pad removal, the permitted use of the buildings, and accommodating all expected activity on site, and I'll explain. The stop work order was relative to concrete pads for buildings being placed over the water line. And based on what is the airport's take on this? Are we comfortable with the water line being relocated, or would we require the concrete pads to be removed? I've communicated with Mark Willett, as has the tenant. Mr. Willett is comfortable with the relocation plan as presented. I've looked at the drawings as well. It relocates a portion of one of the water lines onto the neighboring NRTA leasehold, but I don't believe it's significant. It doesn't appear to conflict with any of their uses or any of our future uses on the lot. So I believe the water line relocation is probably acceptable. For permitted uses, the lease identifies a self-storage facility, an impound lot for vehicles, and a mechanic shop. I do want to pursue just clarification in the alteration application on what is the use of the buildings to be identified, so we can determine if it's compatible with the lease. And then on the issue of parking, I think the airport's concern should be that the leasehold is managed to avoid any spillover of vehicles and traffic onto Bunker Road. So what I'm looking for, and I don't know if it's necessarily more parking spaces, but it's comfort that the 20-foot vehicle lane is wide enough to accommodate vehicles that would be parked in front of storage containers. So you don't have traffic lining up and backing up onto a road that's used by other tenants. With that, I'd be happy to take any further comments or direction. I believe, if no direction is given, we would take this back up in October, which would be before the next planning commission meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Carberg. And I do see that Mr. Smith is in attendance, and if you wish to speak, we'll give him an opportunity to. But first, I would just say that I was at the planning board meeting the other night when Mr. Smith's engineer presented this, and the planning board held it. I think is generally satisfied with the application, though held it over to hear that I think the airport is satisfied with the water line relocation. And I think I agree as well with your points that you've made. It's really, we just want to make sure there's some sort of level of conditions or assurance that, as I see it, and you stated, there's not back up into the road really, of if there's too many, that the site is managed. How do we just assure that and be given assurance, and that perhaps comes under the conditions of the tenant alteration application. But I think that we can get there on that, and knowing now that the water line has been taken care of, and hopefully Mr. Smith will get you the intended uses of the building, and you'll find those acceptable. Could report back to us, I think, in October, and then you could be hopefully positive, at least recommendation from you or the commission for his next planning board meeting. Commissioners, did you have any other questions or input on this?
I don't.
Mr. Smith, you don't need to speak. You're welcome to if you'd like to.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know that we're working hard on becoming compliant. Everything's going really well, and I appreciate everyone's input. I will send an email with who I plan on putting in the two buildings in back, one of which is a wedding events business. That it'll be housing tables and chairs, pretty much, dry storage. And the scope of this project has gone down pretty much in half because of the expansion of the impound area. So I don't anticipate, we're definitely not going to have daily traffic. We might have, 5 or 6, 10 trips a week. But we only have 20 units available, 10 of which are for my use, for my businesses. So I definitely don't foresee any problems with spilling out into the road, and we will manage that, daily for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So we'll have this back on for October, and it'll be good to go for your planning board meeting after that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care. With that, we'll move on to the manager's report.
Okay, for the project update. For the master plan, staff and consultant reviewed 2 alternatives for the runway 6 runway safety area, and will report out in the next meeting of the master plan TAC group for discussion, as well as update the commission in future meetings. Geometry project DB update, our DBE or disadvantaged business enterprise plan revision is nearing completion. For the ARC truck, we're now expecting delivery just a little bit later, January, February timeframe. No other update there. The runway 624 centerline design, I believe we have that complete and it will be out to bid this fall. I think I have a further update in bid status. For non-AIP projects, we're working to transition Jim Hagedorn's lease for partial month-to-month use of Hangar 8 to the new lease for redevelopment of the hangar, which includes additional GSE space for airport storage. I hope to have that for you in the next 1 to 2 meetings. Fence relocation, we're beginning to work with the tenant in the bunker area to schedule the work, the lead times, and accommodate utility survey. So I want to thank him for that. I know he's also busy. No update on the fence relocation for the South Shore. Okay, RFP bid status. The invitation for bids to rehab a portion of the runway 624 center line will be available on September 16th with bids due October 2nd. The invitation bids for refueling pad wall repair, those documents are anticipated to be available on the 23rd of this month. Bids due October 9th. The RFP to lease 33 bunker, the airport is working with the CPO for the town and council to reissue the RFP. We have discovered, well, actually, air traffic control has discovered mold contamination in the control tower mechanical room. So we will be submitting quotes to effect a prompt and full mitigation effort there. And then we are developing the request for expressions of interest for the flat roof building. This is where Blade is located now. We'll put that back out for expressions of interest for an aeronautical use. In the interim, I'm working, or I would like to work with Blade to keep them on month to month. They've been operating well. I know they do operate into Stroll, and it would continue to be income for the airport. So I don't think there's a reason to end that immediately. On that item, I don't believe I need commission approval, but if you disagree with that strategy, please let me know.
Thank you. Any questions on the manager's report, the RFP bid status?
No.
Operations?
Okay, for Labor Day, we had a very busy Labor Day, but a safe and efficient one. The ramp, including the extension, was every square foot was full during Monday afternoon. So I look forward to reviewing and logging the experimental data that our antenna, not the noise monitoring, but our operational antenna and experimental software is monitoring. For Jet A supply, we closed the book on summer without any fuel sales restrictions. On flight procedures, staff held a call with a service provider. So the provider is a private company They do operate in a semi-privileged environment, so I'm not going to go into business details, but they work with the FAA on a private basis with their stakeholders, which include several well-known airports, to chart arrival and departure procedures. So I believe an opportunity exists here to work with the company and work with FAA for the airport to push forward to see if there are changes we would like to see to better support our noise abatement goals that are also compatible with FAA goals for safety, efficiency, and capacity. This is all live together in the same sphere. I intend to move forward and develop an RFQ for evaluating, formally retaining those services. Rent management article. The Nantucket Current had an article regarding the updated rent management plan and its performance to date. I'd say that I appreciate the coverage, but the plan and our management, it isn't a static point and a static process. We're going to continue to evaluate it and develop that plan further to maximize its ability to operate this airport safely, efficiently, and in a friendly of a manner as possible. For statistics, I'm going to move through these really quickly, but please let me know if you have any questions. July operations were up a little over 6%. Southwest ramp ops were down 3%, and I'm covering July. Enplanements were up 10% in July, so that means load factors were up. We're moving more passengers on fewer commercial aircraft. Everybody wins in that scenario. Cape Air for July was up 10% in Boston, 35% in New Bedford, and 218% in Hyannis, 477 versus 150 passengers. So that's the fourth month of growth. I've been corresponding with Cape Air staff. They've been inquiring into our avgas supply because they are seeing high demand in their bookings for weekends since American and Delta stopped service. So that's good to see. Our goal now is to fill those reverse legs with passengers. JetBlue is up 16% in Boston, 5% in DC, 172% in White Plains, and down 12% to JFK. LaGuardia was down 41%, but again, that was a route they shared with American Airlines over the Northeast Alliance, which is now defunct. United was down 15% in Newark, and they planed 496 passengers to Chicago O'Hare, which they did not operate last year. Delta was down 12% in JFK, up 2% in LaGuardia. American was flat for Philadelphia. Charlotte was down 20%. DC was up 5%. And then they enplaned 1,645 passengers to LaGuardia, which they did not operate as their own route last year. JetA overall, I have updated some of these numbers just due to a formatting error in the template, so what I read may not match what's in the stats packet. JetA over in the fiscal year to date is up 8.6% over the 3-year average, up 3% for the last 3 months over that 3-year average, and up 17% for August over that 3-year average. That's both due to demand and the fact that we did not run out of it this year. So we were able to realize our full sales capacity. The FBO portion of that was 13% increase so far in the fiscal year to date over the 3-year averages, 5% over the previous 3 months, and 25% for August. Commercial was roughly flat along those same categories, and low lead was up 6 to 14% as well. So we are moving more low lead. I don't exactly know why. I haven't dug into the numbers to see if it's on Cape Air or if it's on other GA operators. Freight was down 28% in July. Cape Air, Freight, UPS, and Mail were all down. So was FedEx. It was down overall across the change in operators. We had 22 noise calls in July. That's up 5%. 18 of them were from one resident. The APU log summary, we issued 24 entries. We had 86% compliance. From pilots and commands, we issued 2 second warnings. Airport operations comment is that along with the additional signage in place, staff members continue to do a really good job of informing the pilots of restrictions verbally. The pilots have been complying, requesting GPUs, and this has continued to show a decline in the logging of APU entries and VOC. And then for the personnel report, we have accepted offers for the custodian and maintenance positions, both starting September 30th. I will update the names once new staff are on board. And we plan on advertising in the next month for the assistant terminal manager as well. So that notice will go out. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Carberg. Any questions, commissioners, on any of the items that Mr. Carberg just reported on? Okay, hearing none. That'll take us to commissioners' comments. Commissioners, anything for future agenda items or otherwise brief?
Not now.
Okay, thank you. Public comment for any items that were not on the agenda. You can raise your virtual hand or make yourself known. Okay, I'm not seeing any. With that, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session per General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to review the executive session minutes enumerated on the agenda, to discuss strategy regarding Walsh, to discuss strategy regarding Turo, to discuss strategy regarding legal claims against the manufacturers of PFAS, and to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding the green claim, all of which the chair has determined in open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. Not to return to open session. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a
I'll
second? Ms. Topham, how do you vote? Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Do we lose Ms. Topham? I see her as an attendee and not as a panelist now, so Ms. Topham, you're back with us.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, thank you all. Good night. And let's see, and are we able to, Ms. Chapper and NCTV, if you could please leave the meeting, we could have our executive session.